Hello and welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, where we bring you history in a amicable, neighborly way 24/7, 365 or 366 days a year. This is Friendly Neighborhood History, and if you enjoy history, consider liking and subscribing and becoming a Friendly Neighborhood Historian. It's easy as that. Joining also helps us. We've got long-form videos dropping every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, short-form content every day, a Patreon, a Substack, all of that great stuff. And today I want to bring to you another reaction video to my hot takes. Hot takes are short videos that I usually do where I give a perspective that I believe is a historical hot take, and today I'm going to be responding to them, giving more context and declaring whether or not I actually think this is still a hot take and whether or not I actually think this to be true. So buckle up, join us for that, like and subscribe, leave some feedback and comments. That's always really helpful as we get ready and get started. And so the first one here is about the Ottoman Empire, and that'll be the first one we're doing today. So here you go. And yes, we will look at this, and we've got about 10 of them, I think. So like we do every time. Content. Okay, good. Everything's working. Let's start off from the beginning here. And here we go, as you hear me react and give more context to my own historical hot takes.
Here's a historical hot take. The fall of Constantinople was the best thing that ever could have happened to the Europeans because it enabled them to seek new Western trade routes that would lead them to colonize North and South America and build their large mercantile and military empire.
This is definitely true, and I definitely stand by this hot take. A lot of people lament the loss of the Eastern Roman or Byzantine Empire as the end of that eternal tie to Rome in the ancient past of early Europe, and while that was a huge loss, the Europeans went westward and around the south of Africa to get to India and China. Specifically because of this led to the creation of the Portuguese and Spanish empires, and later on the British and French would create large empires because they were no longer going through the Middle East to reach the riches of the Orient by going through the Silk Road, because they didn't want to go by the Ottomans, who were a constant bane on their existence even after they destroyed Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire. So here's a hot take I'm definitely sticking with.
Here's a historical hot take. Richard.
Sorry, the music is too loud. I probably should have turned it down. I don't know what I'm looking at in this pause. Whenever I'm missing something or not sure exactly what I'm going to say next, I always look up. And yeah, I typically do unscripted on this channel, and it sometimes costs me. And yeah.
Richard Nixon would have been considered one of the best presidents of the 20th century and one of the most underrated presidents ever, thanks to his accomplishments in ending the Vietnam War with a U.S. victory, creating the EPA, and other solutions he came up with if it had not been for his failure with the Watergate scandal.
Yeah, I think I was walking somewhere when I did this video, and then I turned the music up too high. But basically, I stand by this one completely. Richard Nixon creating the EPA, ending the Vietnam War with a technical U.S. victory, probably would have prevented this fall of Saigon, opened relations with China, started the détente talks with the Soviet Union. Much of a modern geopolitical scope probably would have been effective had Nixon been president. And remained president for 8 years. He helped create much of the modern geopolitics that we deal with China, and eventually détente helped lead to the collapse of the Soviet Union in some ways. So yeah, an underrated president, but the Watergate scandal, the cover-up around it, really ruined any chances of Nixon being one of the great presidents in U.S. history, despite winning one of the biggest landslides in American history in 1972 when he stood for re-election and actually perpetrated the Watergate scandal.
Here's a historical hot take. Henry Clay, the great compromiser, three-time presidential failed candidate, the founder of the Whig Party, Secretary of State, and Speaker of the House, the most accomplished and greatest American politician you've never heard of, would have been an excellent president had been elected, given his experience and skills.
I know it looks like I'm trapped like in somewhere. I don't know where I recorded this, and I'm always going from place to place where I do these videos, so that gives some context there. But basically, yeah, I stand by this one too, and I think it's 100% true. Henry Clay was known as the Great Compromiser. Despite being from a slave state and being pro-slavery, he was able to make amends to the North and continually acknowledge the growth of the influence of abolition. The architect of the Missouri Compromise and the Compromise of 1850 would have been an excellent president. He basically created the Whig Party and guided it for 20 years. Definitely one of the most experienced and reasonable men in American history, and one of the best politicians you've either never heard of or never became president, despite running and losing several times.
Here's a historical hot take that probably shouldn't be one, and probably one that you agree with. Russia is more of a European country than an Asian country, despite the fact that most
I was walking somewhere. I don't know why.
The largest nation on Earth is part of the Asian continent. Russia has been trying to be more and more European throughout all of its history.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And you look at Moscow and St. Petersburg being technically in Europe, the Ural Mountains, stuff like that. The eastern parts, the larger sections like Siberia and Kamchatka are in Asia, but it's less populated, less developed, and stuff like that. And throughout the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, the Russians did what they could to get as close to the Europeans as possible. And so it's not a huge historical hot take. It's probably more of a hot take to say that Russia is indeed an Asian country because of its geographical position. But just reminding everybody out there that Russia has always wanted to be European in one way or another, even though they've been dreadfully suspicious of Europeans, especially recently. So, this one's not necessarily a hot take, but I do think it's true.
Here's a historical hot take that shouldn't even be one. Ulysses.
See, shouldn't even be one. Even here, I don't think it's a hot take, and I don't know who I'm looking over my shoulder at. I think I had just come out of the gym and I was in the parking lot, and so I just kind of poofed this all out really fast, and that's why I'm going so fast.
Grant is the main reason and X factor as to why the Union Army won the Civil War, and Robert E. Lee is the main reason why the South lasted as long as it did, giving the Confederacy life and hope for a pretty unwinnable conflict.
Yeah, I'm clearly just, exasperated because of running on the treadmill. But yeah, basically getting the cardio in. Yeah, despite the poor quality of this one, I do agree. I don't think this should be a hot take, but Robert E. Lee is one of the greatest U.S. generals in history. If he had not fought for the Confederacy and fought for the Union, the war would have been over a lot sooner. And Grant became president, basically running on the credentials of his successes as a general. So this makes a lot of sense to me and is true.
Here's a
Maybe not a hot take, though.
historical hot take. Despite being pretty innocuous, well known for winning 2 non-consecutive terms and being the first to ever do so, Grover Cleveland is the creepiest president ever, having basically forced himself upon a woman, fathered a child with her, and then paid her hush money to keep the affair and the secret child private.
Yeah, so I did a video where I called it Grover the Not So Good because he was known as Grover the Good because he fought corruption and stuff like that. But Grover Cleveland basically kind of seduced slash forced. It was kind of a reluctance issue with Maria Halpin. He tried to seduce her. She wasn't coming. She wasn't buying it, and it's been contested exactly what happens. But she got pregnant. He was the father. Although he claimed his side claimed that she had the child with another man. Cleveland was paid for the child and paid to keep this story quiet. Although it broke out when he was running for president, and so yeah. Although a lot of people compare him to the other non-consecutive president when it comes to creepiness, and modern presidents due to politics can be considered creepy, like Biden or Trump. And other presidents have been known for their philandering, like Thomas Jefferson with his own slaves. That's kind of unsavory. Grover Cleveland, because of the Maria Halpin scandal, is probably the creepiest president in U.S. history.
Here's a historical hot take. Ivan the Terrible was not actually that terrible at all. This is a mistranslation of the cognomen, and he is actually an impressive and great ruler who made Russia internationally known, powerful, and strong during his 38-year reign.
First man to ever consider himself Tsar. The term Grozny actually probably translates better as awesome or dreadful, and this was given to him after he defeated the Tatar Khanates, the kingdoms, at Astrakhan and Kazan. And these were huge victories for the Russians. It boosted Muscovite standing. It helped create the Russian Empire. He was no more repressive, tyrannical, or violent towards his people than Henry VIII, who was his pseudo-contemporary in England in the 1530s and 40s. And the truth of the matter is that Ivan the Terrible was terrible in many ways. He was repressive of his people, and by modern standards, there was a lot of violence perpetuated. He had his own roaming band of thugs called the Oprichnika, who dressed like monks and tortured people and did all sorts of horrible rites. But Ivan was definitely had a level of paranoia, purging, and violence that wouldn't be seen in Russia until Stalin. He's often been compared to Stalin in many ways, but the idea that he was this mass murdering tyrant is a little bit of an exaggeration, and terrible is not the correct translation of that cognomen. And really, a historical hot take emerges out of ignorance because a lot of people don't know what is actually meant there. What he did for contributions towards Russia's standing, particularly in the West, is huge. And the Russian state and empire probably wouldn't have become what it did without the rise and the power of Ivan the Terrible.
Here's a historical hot take. Had Herbert Hoover's presidency not taken place during the Great Depression, which he warned against and was not responsible for causing, he would be considered a much better president as he was an efficient government worker, a great idea man, and had literally saved the lives of millions of people through his relief efforts at the end of World War I.
I think it's World War II, and that's another hot take and another talk for another time. I'm using it there for simplicity, but yes, Herbert Hoover organized Belgian and Russian relief efforts that saved millions of lives. He was a great idea man. He was a Secretary of Commerce. He had many great building projects, which is why the Hoover Dam is named for him. He wasn't responsible for the Great Depression, but whined and basically tried to do very little to solve it. And so, yeah, Herbert Hoover would have been a great president had the Great Depression not hit. And I don't blame him for the Great Depression, so that's why I have this hot take, and I believe that to be true.
Here's a historical hot take. The ancient Greeks would have conquered all of Persia much sooner, before Alexander the Great, and never would have needed him if they had been united beforehand. Being divided into separate city-states kept them from achieving their greatest goals and spreading their culture all over the ancient world.
What makes this is all true, by the way. What makes this a hot take for me is that saying that Alexander was not necessary for that, because the unification of Philip and then Alexander unleashed the Greek military potential, which was far better than the Persians when it was united, and brought them to their heels. The infighting and divisions of the city states, particularly Athens and Sparta in the Peloponnesian War, which destroyed the Delian League, the Athenian Empire, uh, kept them subservient to the Persians. It was Alexander who helped them rise above it and spread Greek culture everywhere. But they could have done that a lot sooner had Alexander, and Alexander would not have been necessary if they had just united Mycenae, Athens, Thebes, Crete, all of these, the Minoans, all of these different peoples at different areas.
Here's a historical hot take. The French would have won the Hundred Years' War with or without Joan of Arc.
By the way, for the record, I love Alexander the Great, and I have a video on him, but I'll put a card in. But yes, definitely a big fan of him. I think he is necessary for the spreading of Hellenistic culture. I am saying that they could have done a lot sooner, just to clarify. But here's Joan of Arc. This is the last one, by the way.
It was all up to the Dauphin, who was one of the greatest monarchs in European history, Charles VII, who kicked out the English, and by 1453, him and his son had secured victory, and the English were no longer controlling France.
That's controlling France, yeah. So this is Joan of Arc. This is the Siege of Orleans. I love this. The fact that a young girl rose up through the ranks to command military men, it shamed the French and motivated them to kick the English out. She was supposedly motivated by God to do this, although she was later tried as a heretic and killed by the same church that later made her a saint, which is kind of weird to me. But I'm trying to hold a pipe, by the way. That's that black thing. I just couldn't get in the image. Next time I will. But basically, I stand by this one. I just don't think, I think Joan of Arc is a fascinating character in history, but I don't necessarily think that she is this necessary figure. Charles VII is one of the greatest monarchs in French and European history and was able to basically kick the English out of his country for all of his great efforts. And then his son secured the English, the victory against the English in the Hundred Years' War. They didn't need Joan of Arc for it, but it was sure nice to have her there to help them win that war. So that's all I've got. Those are my hot take videos and me reacting to them, giving my perspective a little bit more context. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, consider liking and subscribing and becoming a friendly neighborhood historian, joining us on Patreon or here and giving us support as we continue to grow. All of your contributions help us grow the Friendly Neighborhood History channel and make this better and more accessible, more friendly, more neighborly, and all of that great stuff. But yeah, check out the long form videos every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the shorts every day, and join us for the live streams. Come and have fun with us. Fridays and Saturdays, the Q&A starts at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and Sundays, the live stream lectures are at 4, and you can vote on the Friendly Neighborhood History channel here on YouTube for what topic you would like me to cover in those live stream lectures, so please do so. But yes, leave a comment for feedback, like and subscribe, all that great stuff. Take care, have a wonderful day, and remember, love history. Bye now.